in a lot of systems, including Spycraft, the action, if it's not predicated by the system rules and the system resolution, it's certainly influenced by it significantly. And there is always, as in all RPGs, a component of you skinning what happens. But there's still a very graded, very obvious result. And with these, we want you to know that you've succeeded. We want you to know roughly how well you've succeeded. We want you to be able to mechanically win. But we want you to be able to do it in ways that are consistent with these worlds, and we want to make sure that that your characters can grow beyond the mechanics that are on the page. And so the system, in terms of complexity, we're looking at something that's probably somewhere between your AEG roll and keep system or your White Wolf storyteller system and something more indie. It's probably somewhere in that world of mechanics. But this is Crafty Games, and we build balanced mechanics. Right. We build balanced systems that you love to play as much as you love to use to tell stories, and so there will still be an element of strategy, there will still be an element of character building, there will still be an element of you not necessarily gaming the system, but certainly playing the game.
Well, yes, and a concern for balance. I mean, this is still a game for gamers, and so it has to be. But the idea is that we have to allow, when you have two properties where the power of magic is so, again, suggested and so or so wide within a narrow range, in the case of Allomancy, or in the case of
there's so many applications with Allomancy.
Or in Looking Glass, where your power is imagination.
Yeah.
How do you define imagination? I mean, you could go on and on and on, and then how imaginative are you being if every rule for imagination is strictly laid out?
The examples, a good way to put it, we could have a list of things that you could do in Mistborn, and it could be as specific as push off a coin in order to move through town. But we don't want to do that. Instead, we want to have a way for you to, we know that you're pushing off of metal. We want there to be a set way to determine how well you result at doing that, and for you to define what the actual result is yourself. Right. And imagination demands that, because literally in Looking Glass Wars, you can create anything that you want with imagination. So it's... how
are you going to limit that?
Yeah, how are you going to handle that in a balanced way?
And that's the exact concern, and that's where the challenge is in both these properties. That in Mistborn, it's laying out the setting the boundaries and then allowing it to be, essentially controlling the vertical, but allowing lots of horizontal movement. Right. And so you can allow players who have, or characters who have, one power or no powers, but generally one power. How do you let them do something really awesome? How are you going to resolve things like the steel pushing matches and things like that? Those are all core parts of it, and those have to be resolved, or at least suggested systemically in a way that can be resolved, so you're not like, you weigh 40 pounds, you wouldn't be throwing me across the room or whatever else. So it has to be consistent with the property, and that's, that's where the kind of the trifecta of challenges are. Right. It's.
And along with that goes the fact that these settings are populated by many characters who don't require magic to be cool. Mm-hmm. As people know from our products, we're pretty good at coming up with ways to make the guy that isn't a spy cool in Spycraft, and the guy that isn't necessarily a mage or the biggest, baddest barbarian in the world cool in Fantasycraft. That's going to continue in these. So don't be afraid that the system is going to be it's a poor term, but wishy-washy. It's not going to be a system that throws its hands up and says it's all on you. It's still a game.
It's still going to be a game, very much so.
Yeah, but it is critical that you're bringing a component to the table and that we're recognizing that as part of the game. So. Very differently, but as yet in almost the same way. We'll explain. Alex was the one in charge of Mistborn.
Right. So I heard of Mistborn after I heard of Mistborn from a friend of mine who said, "You really got to check this out. I know you're you're doing games and you've got this fantasy game you're working on early on in the process, you should really look at this novel series I like so much. And so, I did, and I got about 20 pages into it, and I'm like, yeah, I should be looking at doing a license. And we knew Brandon seemed like an up-and-coming author. I mean, he had a great spark to his stuff. He had a really intriguing setting. I am going to spoil within the first 20 pages of the first book of Mistborn, like that encounter between Kelsier and the Inquisitor. Just that immediate thing was like, oh, sweet, and that was it for me. That was like, I got to try to do something with this. Turned out that night, that after I finished this, Brandon Sanderson was doing a book reading and a Q&A session, and so I emailed him, not expecting to hear. I'm like, I know you're coming into town tonight. Like, you're going to be reading in 6 hours. Do you have some time to meet? I work for this game company, and I'd like to talk to you about licensing. And he was like, totally. So I went. I left work. I changed clothes. I went out there. I talked to him. He was totally enthusiastic. He had been kind of hoping someone would come and talk to him about it, and that's how it started. And then we just worked out the details, and we worked out the details, and it all fell into place. It's been great working with him. He's been...
Well, and we got a little lucky in that it was announced that he was going to be the new writer for the Wheel of Time series maybe a month after we closed the deal and announced this.
Right,
so.
Yeah. So it's very fortunate for us, certainly. But that hasn't changed. I mean, that hasn't changed the relationship at all. And so we still talk on a fairly regular basis.
And Brandon's a gamer.
Yes, that's the other thing, is you can tell. If you've read the books, you can see parts where a gamer's thought through it.
Any series that all
Exactly. Why does this guy not suck? There's no...
There's an internal logic to the way Allomancy works, and there's an internal balance to the way Allomancy works, which isn't necessary in a novel, and yet he took the trouble to do it, which made it really appealing to us. I mean, all I had to do when Alex brought the book to me was flip through to the appendix, and I was like, okay, done. Yeah.
Well, we'll probably be using this.
Yeah.
And and so it's been really cool working with him, and I think I'm really excited to do this book and to bring this game out. So you want to talk about?
Looking Glass Wars was similar in the way it came together, but the trappings were very different. And Frank's a very different kind of novelist. His world is very similar, but he's very different than Brandon is, and that's actually wonderful. It brings a different kind of flavor to the proceedings. But I go to Comic-Con every year. I love Comic-Con. It's sort of my vacation show, and my cohort in crime, Steve Huff, who's also our graphic designer and responsible for the way Fantasy Craft looks. He and Ben McSweeney, the main artist on those books. The man, the myth, the legend. We were at Comic-Con, and we saw the Looking Glass Wars when I think it was the first year that Frank had been there, or at least it was the first year I had seen him. And he was promoting the Looking Glass Wars main novel and the Hatter M graphic novel. And Steve and I picked those up and went back that night and were reading them, and we were thinking, this would make a great role-playing game setting. And we thought, it was one of those things, you think that constantly. I've said that about, television shows and all sorts of things, but we thought, well, we might as well ask. So, and this was actually well before the Mistborn deal was closed.
Right.
It was interesting because we had started Crafty thinking, well, if we get a license, that would be cool. And then later on, we're thinking, no, it would be. Let's look for a license, one.
Right.
And then Alex got the ball rolling with Mistborn, and I got the ball rolling with these, and they just sort of came together side by side. I explained to Frank Bedore what we do, and he's not a gamer, but he was very receptive to the idea, and we talked about what the possibilities were for what the setting might look like, and how the game might play, and we went through a couple of early incarnations of our system, and